Okay. Call the meeting for the Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee to order. With that, Brian, I think, would you take roll, please?
Senator Anderson. Here. Senator Beitman. Here. Representative McGuire. Here. Representative Winter. Here. Chairman Boner. Here. Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
All present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. So just a couple things. Remember decorum in the meeting. And that, please remember to adjust the chair. And I don't think this group needs any other introduction to the rules we work by. I find it weird to have all the senators over here and Chairman Boner has all the representatives. I don't know if that's a message or not. So with that, why don't we get started? Unless, Chairman, do you have anything to add?
No.
Nope. Okay. We'll hit it running then. Let's see. First up, we have Lyle Myler, please, come on up. If you'd introduce yourself and who you represent.
Chairman Burkhart, I am.
Right, it'll turn green. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Burkhart, I'm Lyle Myler. I'm with the Bureau of Reclamation Wyoming Area Office just across the river in Mills. We operate and maintain several dams and hydroelectric power plants in the state on the North Platte River, Shoshone and Wind River basins. We also deliver a supplemental supply of storage water to approximately 325,000 acres in Wyoming and about 275,000 acres in Nebraska. So that's kind of our function here. I've been asked to provide an update with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure law, commonly known as bill, with regard to the provision for the Carry Act projects, specifically with regard to Lapral Dam here in Wyoming, which is a non-reclamation facility. So if it pleases the committee, I'd like to just kind of give a background of the status of interactions to date.
Please.
What I believe will be future steps, and then respond to any questions the committee might have. So, general background: on November 15th of last year, 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law was enacted. That section 40901 authorized to be appropriated to the Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Commissioner of Reclamation, through Section 2, $3.2 billion for investment in aging infrastructure. Section 40901, 2B of that bill provided $100 million of that 3.2 to be made available for rehabilitation, reconstruction, or replacement of a dam originally developed pursuant to the Carry Act, which met the requirements of 40904B. So with regard to that assistance that was made available on January 10th, Governor Gordon provided a letter to our Commissioner of Reclamation, Camille Touton, certifying that Lapral met that requirement for that assistance. On March 2nd of 2020, Senator Barrasso sent a letter to our Deputy Commissioner of Reclamation, David Palumbo, stating that under 40904B, that the assistance provided should be non-reimbursable under that. On March 22nd, our staff had interactions with the Wyoming Development Office staff, Jason Mead, to get a status on Governor Gordon's request. At that time, our office was informed that reclamation leadership was in the process of evaluating the request, and that after that was completed, we'd respond to Governor Gordon's letter. So since mid-March, our staff has been in communication with Wyoming Water Development Office staff with regard to the status. We've been communicating and sharing information. I've also been meeting since April on a monthly basis with the governor's water and environmental advisor, providing what information I had at the time. On June 1, we informed the Wyoming Water Development Office that the commissioner would be sending a letter to Governor Gordon that would basically include the official decision regarding the status of funding being reimbursable or non-reimbursable under the law. And that is in the works as far as I know. It's in draft, making its way through our leadership. On June 3rd, the Wyoming area office, we've sent a letter to the Wyoming Water Development Office requesting documents that would verify Lapral Dam's eligibility under the law. And on June 23rd, the Wyoming Development Office responded to that request and provided the documentation, which is currently being reviewed by a reclamation team to determine the eligibility of that, which would be responded to through communication with our commissioner. So that's currently what has occurred. Future steps, as I understand it, Reclamation is going to respond with regard to the documentation sent by the Wyoming Water Development Office with regard to the project's eligibility, whether it's eligible, not eligible, or whether we need additional information. So that's kind of the immediate next step. If it's determined eligible, then Reclamation will initiate a financial agreement assistance process where we work with the sponsor to lay out the details. So in that financial assistance agreement, that's where a lot of the questions and details will be laid out as far as how the money will be provided, who the agreement will be with, what entity, who the requirements for NEPA, and other financial type reporting, and just general schedule for the overall project. All those details have yet to be worked out in that. So that's kind of where we're at this point. I will pause and respond to questions of the committee.
Any questions for Mr. Myler? John, Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have there been any estimates as to the cost of this plan thus far, or does that occur after the money has been appropriated?
Mr. Myler?
My understanding is that the state has some preliminary cost estimates, at least that it exceeds the $50 million threshold that's identified in the bill. The amount of funding that will be provided by Reclamation will be determined based on what the state provides, and in those financial assistance agreement discussions, that will be settled there. So as far as the exact costs that the state or their consultant has produced, I don't know those exact numbers.
Follow-up, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you have no idea then thus far as to the time frame or anything like that this may occur?
Mr.
No,
Myler?
those questions would be, as far as Reclamation's side of things, it's likely going to be a couple of months down the road before we get some evaluations completed and get to the point where we can enter those financial agreement discussions with the state. And if the state has background information on what they've come up with for alternatives and proposed costs, I don't have those numbers to discuss.
Representative McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I've been requested by the Seaplane Association of America. The question is, with regard to the waters of the state of Wyoming, most of them obviously are controlled in some manner by the Bureau of Reclamation, waters that are large enough for a seaplane or a float plane to land on. And right now they're restricted. There's no access for seaplanes or float planes. And the concern is, and it's not at your level, it's been asked at a much higher level. I'm just bringing it up so that if you're part of one of those conversations, you could maybe give them a little bit of background that the issue is with aircraft that are transiting either east to west or north to south, that there's no place in Wyoming other than Lake DeSmet for them to land, especially if they need to fuel up or for whatever reason. And so the question is, the request is just to continue to consider that. The association has contacted the Wyoming Game and Fish, and they have a protocol to take care of invasive species. So that portion is taken care of. The question is just access to Bureau of Reclamation waters. And the advantage would be, so for example, if you go to their association webpage, a pilot or a company that's transiting anywhere close to Wyoming either has to go north or south or on either side, east or west. It just makes Wyoming look a little bit unfriendly to our seaplane pilots. And also some of them are used for firefighting. And so then they have to go through a process to make sure, for example, the fire that was out in the Pedro Mountains, they used seaplanes to attack that fire, but they were delayed several days because they had to wait to get a permit, and then there was an emergency, all kinds of things going on. It would be much easier if they had a more streamlined approach to be able to get to that. So the question is, if you would please monitor that during the conversations, and if anybody can come and make a presentation that would help ease those regulations, I personally would be happy to come and talk to them, and we appreciate your consideration. So thank you.
So, Mr. Myler, back to Lapral Reservoir. So, Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you taking time to be in front of this committee. As you can imagine, this is a big deal for Converse County. It's a big deal for the state as well, given the structural issues at Lapral Dam and the failures that we've seen in significant water infrastructure. We saw just the second one in Goshen County, a couple weeks ago. So want to avoid the life safety issues, and I have to say that this bipartisan infrastructure bill came at just about the right time for Lapral. So that being said, I think you may have alluded to it. This is a unique, somewhat unique circumstance that we don't often have Bureau of Rec funding for these types of facilities. So appreciate you coming here to provide some information as to the process and the timeframe we can expect, and just have a few questions, I guess, about that. And so in terms of the regulatory requirements that's going to be associated with these federal funds, can you go in a little bit more detail as to what those may or likely will be? And I understand you said that there's going to be that those details will be discussed, but think about, say, the National Historic Preservation Act. Is it going to be necessary to check all the boxes for a Lapral Dam that's going to be underwater, here in hopefully in a couple of years, and things of that nature? Can you just give us a little bit more information as to what the requirements would be associated with those federal funds, or what they could be, I guess, moving forward?
Mr. Myler?
Certainly. From my experience with reclamation, we've had dam safety projects at Glendo Dam, at Guernsey Dam, and we've currently got one underway at Bull Lake Dam and Reservoir over near Riverton area. Those typically, there is a requirement to complete National Environmental Policy Act requirements, which in my experience, we've been able to complete those through an environmental assessment type process, which in a nutshell, I'll just kind of summarize, is to identify the purpose and need of the project, develop different alternatives, evaluate those alternatives with regard to potential effects, and then from that evaluation, develop a preferred alternative. There's a document prepared that documents that. That's shared in draft form with the public, typically a 30-day review. There may Typically, there's a public meeting held in the area of the work, and then the comments received from the written document and the public meetings, those are addressed. If there's something significant that comes up during that process, it may need to move to a more complicated environmental assessment to an environmental impact statement. And then once that document is completed, Reclamation would adopt that. Likely that document would be something that would be done by a contractor. And we'd review that information, adopt that, and Reclamation would sign a finding of no significant impact, and then the project basically could proceed construction. So during part of that process, the National Historic Preservation Act requirements would come into play. There would be a cultural resource assessment in the area. Typically, a contractor is hired with some archaeological expertise that would come in and evaluate if there's any cultural materials in the site, the historic nature of the structure. A lot of times structures over 100 years of age require some sort of photo documentation to mitigate adverse effects. I know at our Bull Lake Dam project, where we're reconstructing a spillway, we've done some photo documentation as far as the historic structure during construction photos, and then what the structure is going to look like after the fact to meet those requirements. And that requires close coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office in Cheyenne.
Follow-up?
Yeah, so based off your previous experience, how long does that process take? Say, assume it's just an EA, not a full-on EIS. How long does that usually take?
Well,
Mr. Myler?
thank you. Starting from scratch, it can take up to a year. But depending on the information that's already available for Lapral, there may be the opportunity to shorten that window.
Follow-up?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, that's good news. I think that'll work pretty well within our internal process for water development. And frankly, it seems like we're already going down that path with the consultant of gathering that information. And that was really one of the questions I had is, is this going to be absolutely necessary? And it seems like it is if there's federal
Yes.
funds attached. And so that answers at least one of the questions that water development seemed to not be able to answer at another meeting. So yeah, I appreciate once again the fact that you're working with us on this, and I just want to also kind of pass on some questions I've got from my constituents. Under any circumstances, could you anticipate there being any sort of federal strings being attached to actual land that is irrigated by the water stored in this structure?
Mr. Myler?
So downstream, not associated at all with the structure itself, except that they get water from it, private land. Is there going to be any change to those water users, just given the fact that there's federal funds?
Mr. Myler?
At this time, Reclamation would provide the financial assistance through the law. There would be some processes identified as far as schedule, how the finances would be provided and how the reporting would go. As far as any additional requirements on downstream water users associated with the facility, I don't anticipate any requirements with regard to that. I would anticipate that the Reclamation would provide the funding, and that the state or the consultant would basically be responsible to verify construction and design of the project, that it was functioning and would be safety considerations were met. So no, I would not at this time anticipate any additional requirements to the water users that receive service from the facility.
Follow-up, anyone?
Sure. Nobody else has any.
Well, and so once again, I appreciate it. Is there anything that the state could be doing to move this process along? Anything we can do to help?
Mr. Myler?
Well, right now, we're currently in close communication with Jason Mead, who is the interim director of the Wyoming Water Development Office. I have staff that's interacting with Jason. They've provided the documentation that Reclamation is evaluating to determine eligibility. So we've got a good working relationship there. I'm also coordinating and communicating the information I have, and when I get it to the governor's water and environmental advisor. So right now, it's the role of our office is basically the financial assistance agreement is going to be developed by, we have folks in our Denver office that handle that type of agreement. So the role of our office here, my role will be to provide communication and coordination with regard to needs of the project. We're not really in a role of decision-making or setting the terms of that agreement. But if there's needs or questions, those can certainly be directed to me, and I can work to receive the answers to those questions.
Oh, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Am I understanding correctly that we have not determined yet if this is a repair or replace of the entire facility?
Mr. Myler?
Right now, there is, before reclamation, basically the question of whether the project is eligible or not. And as part of that, there is the requirements of the infrastructure law identified if the structure, the eligibility is if the structure's exceeded its useful life, the rehabilitation of the structure would cost more than $50 million. And there's probably another requirement in there I missed, but that's kind of what the documentation that the Wyoming Development Office has provided to us to evaluate. So it's not that we're looking at a repair, but the assistance will be associated with what the preferred alternative is, I guess, that the state comes up with for the structure.
Follow up?
Follow up?
And do I understand you correctly that this will all be tax money, federal and state? There'll be no participation from the users or the beneficiaries of the water, which I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's irrigators and maybe City of Glen Rock. I don't know who gets the water.
Mr. Myler? Oh. Okay, Chairman Boner, if you want to answer part of that.
Yeah, sure. And so this is something that we've gone through the process of doing stage 1, stage 2. Water Development has identified that it's more cost effective to replace the dam instead of trying to repair it again. And so it is irrigators on Lapral Creek that are paying, their rates are going up, so they are footing the bill a little bit. But, it's mostly, so far it's been state funds through our Water Development Office. And of course, we're looking for these federal funds because it will be a very large project. I think the number that we've been hearing on Select Water is $70 or $80 million. And so obviously that's a fluid number. That's what we've assessed so far, and we'll get to learn, it looks like, in the next couple of months what the Bureau of Rec thinks about all that. But we've already gone through this process and have been going through the process for a couple of years now. And so there's, like I said, it's about more than just the irrigators. There's life safety issues associated with a dam of that size. It's that close to the interstate, a major thoroughfare through Wyoming. And so there's lots of different factors there. And so, the state's done a lot of the analysis so far, and we're just looking at the funding element, which, like I said, that infrastructure bill was pretty good timing. So hopefully I get a little bit more. So
Follow up, Senator?
Mr. Chairman, so what I hear you saying is that the irrigators are going to be paying more to the state, but not to the Bureau of Rec. The Bureau of Rec is not charging them anything, but the state is charging them more.
Mr. Myler, do you want to address that, or Chairman Boner?
Well, let me jump in just real quickly. So the financial assistance agreement will likely, I envision that happening through the Wyoming Water Development Office and a relationship there. We had a similar relationship with work we did at Pathfinder Dam, where the Wyoming Water Development Office actually hired a contractor. The contractor modified a reclamation facility. We worked closely with that. In this situation, I perceive that the agreement is going to be with an entity like the Wyoming Water Development Office. We would provide up to $100 million of the infrastructure law funding to the state for the work. The amount provided to the state, like I say, would be developed based on cost estimates that are currently available and determined during our financial assistance discussions. And at that point, if the expenditures exceeded the amount we provided, the state would direct those costs through whatever mechanism they would choose to direct those costs. But it wouldn't be something that Reclamation would pursue further from a landowner or anything else.
Representative McGuire, did you have another question? I thought you, okay. So, Mr. Myler, just a couple questions, mostly for the people here who don't know. About how large, both in height and in storage capacity, is Lapral, and about how old is it? My understanding is it's over 100 years old. Am I correct?
That's my understanding. I'm not really prepared to address the specifics of Lapral Dam. It's not a reclamation facility, so I'm not that familiar with it, other than that it's currently under a reservoir restriction because of dam safety concerns. Yeah, so I'm not prepared to address those specifics.
Okay, thank you. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Myler, I don't know if you're, excuse me, if you're familiar with the 30/30 land grab or the America the Beautiful program that this administration has proposed. My question is, I wanted to tag on to Senator Boner's question about additional requirements for the downcountry water users. Can we depend on you to advise this committee of any additional requirements that may come up from the administration relative to these downstream users? Are you familiar with the 30/30 program?
Mr.
No,
Myler?
no, I'm not.
I was going to ask you if you wanted to wade into that one.
No, I'm not prepared to. I have no background or understanding of how that would involve the Bureau of Reclamation at this time.
Well, if you could,
Senator, follow up?
yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you hear anything, could you advise this committee that we should, something like that, we should be aware of?
Certainly.
Mr. Myler?
Excuse me. Certainly. The 30/30 Land Act is the reference that.
It's the 30/30 land grab, they call it. They've now renamed it the America the Beautiful program.
Okay.
And Mr. Myler, I realize, I think all of us do, you would not generally deal with that issue. You concentrate in your own sphere of influence, which is water and the reservoirs and that. So thank you.
Right. If that's. Thank you. I will, if I become aware of discussions, I can certainly provide information.
So, Chairman Boner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on, I think that that question kind of highlights some of the concerns that at least I'm hearing locally. We've seen it in recent, the past year, say the Medicaid and Medicare program being used to, force, vaccines. We've seen, our school lunch program being used to, try to produce outcomes in our local school districts that may or may not necessarily reflect the values of those local school districts. So that's just kind of the general concern, that the greater political context, I guess, that, that there's a concern out there that this administration will try to push, policy objectives through, federal funding that never did before and hasn't been done before. And so that's just kind of the general concern, I think, that I'm hearing at least. And I agree, there's no reason to believe that that's going to actually be the case in this instance, but it's something that we're concerned about. So I think Representative Winters is spot on. And, if you hear of anything along those lines just comes out of the blue, just be sure to let us know. And I think that should suffice for alleviating those concerns. So hopefully that adds a little bit of clarity there. So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I looked up Lapral in the Bible here, so I know it's true. It says it was built in 1909 and modified in 1980. It's privately owned by the Lapral Irrigation District. Its height is 135 feet. Wow, I didn't realize it was that big. The storage is 26,850 acre feet. So that's pretty good sized. What other questions did we have?
I think that's the history of the Lapral Reservoir.
Yep, 1909.
And I think just some chairman's privilege here for those listening remotely and those here. I think that reservoir was listed as a high-risk safety reservoir a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, actually. And we've been working on getting it fixed. It was repaired once. I think it probably needs replaced. And so for disclosure, I used to live downstream of that reservoir, which always tended to, even at that time, worry us a little bit. It's a large reservoir, but it provides a lot of good use in that part of the state, and quickly, I think every drop of water, and I mean every drop we can store and save, is going to become important to Wyoming, considering a number of issues we have going. Any other questions for Mr. Myler? Mr. Myler, thank you for being here.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And we do appreciate you being here. If you would hang with us just in case. So is there any public testimony concerning the Lapral Dam and Reservoir? Anyone in the room? Anyone remotely? No? Okay. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And we
Thank
look
you.
forward to working with you, and hopefully we can get the money to fix that. And I imagine it's going to be a complete rebuild. So big construction project, but for a very good use.
Certainly.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we'll we're ahead of schedule already. That's amazing. We'll move into the next topic, Bureau of Land Management, oil and gas issues. And I'll just go by the list I have. So first up, we have Mr. Dwayne Spencer, Deputy State Director, Land and Minerals for the Bureau of Land Management. Mr. Spencer. If you would just identify yourself for the record and for those people watching remotely.
All right. Good morning. I'm Dwayne Spencer. I'm the BLM Wyoming Deputy State Director for Minerals and Lands.
And I will start with a question.
Oh, okay.
Just to set us up. So, Mr. Spencer, you don't make the rules, you just follow them. Am I correct?
Most of the time, yes.
Thank
Yep.
you. Proceed.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Burkhart and members of the committee. I appreciate the invitation to appear before you today to provide information about the federal oil and gas program in Wyoming. First, I'd like to update you on our most recent lease sale. We offered 122 parcels for lease through a competitive online auction on June 29th and 30th. Out of those parcels, BLM Wyoming received bids on 81 of them. The sale netted approximately $13 million. The state of Wyoming receives 49% of the proceeds from each lease sale. The rest goes to the U.S. Treasury. This provides non-tax revenue that supports state, local, and national priorities. The Department of the Interior reviewed the oil and gas program and released its findings in November 2021. The June lease sale implemented recommendations in the DOI report, including significant reforms to benefit taxpayers, ensure tribal consultation, and take climate change into account. For example, the lease sale applied an 18.5% royalty rate on competitively sold oil and gas lease parcels, an increase from the previous 12.5%. The royalty rate is still the same for non-competitive parcels. Other reforms focused on leasing parcels near existing development and infrastructure, such as gathering lines and help reduce venting and flaring, and will help conserve the resilience of intact public lands and functioning ecosystems. We also prioritized avoiding important wildlife habitat and migration corridors and sensitive cultural areas. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm happy to discuss any questions the committee might have.
Okay. Questions? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, so you had 80, I think you said 81 bids on parcels. So on those bids, will they be able to get APDs for those parcels rapidly, or will they be delayed for some time?
Mr. Spencer?
Senator Anderson, that once the leases are issued, the applicant or the lessee can submit APDs for processing once they have that lease. Right now, I don't think any of them have been issued yet. There's a slight delay between getting the final payments and then the actual issuance of the lease normally takes place. It'll be this month. They'll get out. After that, they'll have full use of their lease.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you familiar with a methodology where wind turbines are placed on federal BLM lands? And is that a lease similar to oil and gas lease? And does it have a finite end or termination point?
Mr. Spencer?
Oh, sorry. So renewable energy permitting is typically handled under a right-of-way agreement as a lands action. So there is no lease associated with a wind turbine location. It's handled as a right-of-way.
Follow-up?
So is there a fee that's paid to the federal government for the placement of that wind turbine on the federal land?
Mr. Spencer?
There is a processing fee associated with those right-of-way applications there. Most wind turbine applications have a full cost recovery associated with them, meaning the applicant pays for the staff time associated with it, as well as the NEPA document. And then once that right-of-way is issued, there is a fee that is based, there's a rental fee, and then there's a megawatt fee associated with it. And I can't describe how that is all calculated right at this point, but there is a fee associated with the megawatts generated from it versus a lease or royalty.
Follow-up?
And is there any share of that that comes back to the state of Wyoming? For example, you mentioned 49% for oil and gas comes back to the state of Wyoming. With regard to the placement of a wind turbine on federal land, is there any return to the state of Wyoming? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Spencer?
No, there is no sharing of that fee.
Okay, thank you.
Other question? Oh, Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Mr. Spencer. As Chairman Burkout said, certainly recognize there's been some significant changes in the oil and gas leasing program. And certainly none of them those ideas didn't come from the Wyoming State Office, and just appreciate the work that your staff put in to, constantly adjust to the new requirements that are being pushed down from the top, and appreciate that you did in fact have a lease sale. More comments on that when we get to the governor's office, but just trying to flesh out the scope of this sale a little bit more compared to previous sales. Obviously, it's been a year and a half since we had a lease sale. You said you actually got 81 leases out the door. How does that compare to, say, a previous quarterly lease that, say, we had the last one under the previous administration? Do you remember how many leases would go on an average lease sale before we had all these changes?
Mr. Spencer?
As everyone may recall, as we've talked about this topic there, a lot of the lease sales have really evolved in response to the ongoing litigation related to greenhouse gases and sage grouse, which has caused a real fluctuation in the number of parcels we've been able to offer over the last, I'm going to say, three years. We started off with over 400 parcels, which was a pretty big sale to get done, and ended up as deferring down to the 122 out of, I can't remember the exact number, somewhere around 420 we started with. So we ended up with quite a few deferrals along the way, a lot of them related to sage grouse. So it was a big sale. 122 is a fairly standard size one when you ebb and flow over time.
Follow up?
So just to be clear that you talk about an average, we sell 122, say during the previous administration, that's how much you would do on a quarterly basis, right? Not once every 1.5 years, right? So, just trying to understand, try to compare apples to apples the best we can. So during the previous administration, 122 leases would be offered on a quarterly basis. Is that correct?
Mr.
Roughly
Spencer?
That would be correct. I'm going to say here our average size was somewhere around, starting with around 200 parcels would be a typical quarterly sale, give or take. We've had a few big ones, 400 to 500, that were taking approximately 4 to 5 days to have the sale, just because of the capacity for paying the bonus bids and all the money accounting that has to handle with that, and the timeliness of the payments there. So we've had a couple that were in that 400 and 500 range.
Mr. Chairman?
And what was I don't know what you call it, the success rate? How many of those leases were actually bought up by an oil and gas company on a percentage basis?
Mr. Spencer?
Roughly speaking.
Mr. Chairman, we had quite a few, had quite a streak there where we had 100% of all of them receiving bids, and that does ebb and flow sometimes because of the way the process is set up. It's an online auction there. And so the minimum bid is $2 an acre, which is the same price you're going to pay over the counter. And so, people will hang back sometimes to see, do I get it, or do I just go buy it the next day? You can get it over the counter non-competitively. Why pay that extra bonus bid if you don't need to do it there? So there is some of that flux there, but normally when prices are high and things are pretty active, we'll sell close to 100%. This was a little lower percentage than normal.
Other questions? So Mr. Spencer, the 81 parcels that were leased, that did sell, where are the majority of those at? Just some background on the size of those, for
Okay.
whatever you have. You don't have to be real specific. This is a very general question, please.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't have them all memorized, but roughly speaking, for the last 4 years, the bulk of the activity has been in the Powder River Basin. That's where a lot of the interest in. We get the scattering in the Green River Basin, in Rollins and Rock Springs, and a few up in the Pinedale area. They ebb and flow. We've typically seen most of the parcels coming up in the more oil producing regions, which would be up here in the northeast part of Wyoming, rather than the gas prone areas in Rollins, Rock Springs, Pinedale. That's ebbed and flowed. So the bulk of the parcels are in the northeast part. We had a scattering this time. Trying to visualize the map here, should have brought it here, but generally speaking, this is where most of the action is up here in the Powder River Basin.
Okay. So, Mr. Spencer, you mentioned that a number of parcels were withdrawn from this lease sale, due to sage grouse issues. So were those just general sage grouse issues, or were they in the core areas? I think Wyoming's done a pretty good job on sage grouse, and then to be told, well, we can't lease because of sage grouse. So just some background on that sage grouse issue, please.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. The parcels that were ended up deferred were in the priority/core areas. And may recall the last time we discussed this topic there, we'd had a number of lawsuits related to the sage grouse resource management plans and how we implemented the screening before we offered those parcels. And this sale was the first one that we were going to have where we had included back the priority habitat or core parcels in that we think we had developed the screening that satisfied all the court requirements. And so we had included those, and as everybody here is aware, that this sale included parcels that were previously slated for the last year and a half or more. So it included a combination of quite a few different parcels versus when we originally started, it was going to be 100% of the priority habitat. We increased that size up into the 400 range, included more general and other type parcels. Almost all of them, but like 9 of them had sage grouse habitat. So there's not a lot of 9 non-sage grouse habitat parcels to offer there. But we ended up having further discussions about, does our screening still satisfy all the litigation going on about the high priority core areas and all of that? And some folks still want more work on that to see, do we still meet that standard here before we launch into another resource management plan revision, which you've all heard about, that they're starting another sage grouse plan revision there. So linking that all up together is why we ended up deferring
Thank you.
those.
I'll let our sage grouse working group address all of those specific issues. I was just curious.
Yeah.
So, because I think it's just happenstance between those birds and where the deposits are, that it seems like all of the good wells are in sage grouse habitat areas. So,
But not that many in priority habitat. Most of the priority habitats don't have a lot of wells in them. Got very tight restrictions between BLM and the state there on the 5% disturbance level, 1 per 640 disturbance, 5% caps and everything. So there's not a lot of high level of disturbance in the priority habitat management areas. It's been handled very well.
so Mr. Spencer, in addressing those issues, I believe it was 3 years ago, we passed a number of sage grouse bills. I think the Minerals Committee sponsored a bill on habitat mitigation and that. Is that working well in conjunction with the sales and the leases? Our ability to, in effect, buy sage grouse habitat credits?
I'm not really prepared to speak about sage grouse compensatory mitigation. Typically that occurs not at the leasing stage, that's at the APD stage is when you start addressing that, or when you have exceptions for things. So that's when that's dealt with. Don't have a lot of information prepared.
So I guess my question is does that help with the leases and what can be offered, the ability to do that here in Wyoming? And that if you want to wade into the whole sage grouse thing, that's fine. If not, I sure understand, weren't prepared for that level of discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I do feel comfortable saying that the compensatory mitigation mechanisms don't really come into play at the leasing stage, because at the leasing stage, it's looking at that resource management plan and looking at that prioritization and screening and the stipulations that were put together.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Spencer? No, Mr. Spencer, thank you.
Thank you
very much for being here. Thank you for giving us that update and for running that lease. It's been a while, and that's something Wyoming finds very important, are those leases. And that's if you would just stay with us in case a question comes up. Okay.
Thank you.
Next on my list, I have Mr. Luthi, the governor's energy advisor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me?
Mr. Luthi, yes, we can. Please proceed.
I should probably say, do you want to be able to hear me? But I'll be happy to proceed, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Select Committee. I'm Randall Luthi, the Chief Energy Advisor to Governor Gordon. I bring greetings from the governor to you, and he does truly look forward to continuing to work with you as we navigate this relationship with our federal government and our shared natural resources. Thank you for the opportunity to participate virtually. It doesn't take the place of being there in person, and I understand that, but every once in a while, it actually is more efficient to be able to use technology. And I think I've said this before, clearly you are one of my favorite committees before which to appear. So there we go, to throw the compliment out there. Yeah. Our topic this morning currently is oil and gas issues, and they're of great importance to everybody in Wyoming. A strong oil and gas industry provides jobs, revenue, stability for our economy, and a strong oil and gas industry also contributes to the well-being of our wildlife, since companies have worked closely with our Game and Fish Department to identify and preserve key habitats. Individuals who work for those companies also hunt and fish, and many are actively involved in conservation efforts. You know, I've often described our relationship with the federal government as a shotgun wedding. They're our biggest neighbor. We're forced to live with each other in the same house. They control approximately 67% of our mineral estate and almost 50% of our surface. Policies and decisions out of DC greatly, let me underline that, greatly affect all of us here. The DC fear of climate change influences greatly leasing decisions in Wyoming, particularly oil, gas, and coal. However, it is the view of the governor that fossil fuels are a part of the solution, and this effort to leave it in the ground will only increase energy prices and not meet the administration's own climate goals. You know, other countries are more than willing to meet the world's energy needs. I appreciate Mr. Spencer's synopsis of the most recent sale, and I do look forward to Petroleum Association's informative perspective from the oil and gas industry. But from our perspective, the good news is that there was a sale after 18 months, a sale that was arguably forced by litigation. Several Wyoming-based companies purchased leases, and as mentioned, Wyoming will receive just a little over $6 million. The bad news, the sale was 18 months late, was approximately 75% smaller than originally planned, had a huge number of state director deferrals, and offered many less than desirable leases. In summary, it was a long-awaited but paltry sale, but a sale nonetheless. The governor is very appreciative of those producers who are hanging in there, continuing to invest in Wyoming, and we all look forward to more sales, and sales on a quarterly basis, not a year-and-a-half basis. You know, lack of sales is only part of our issue, and it's been mentioned before. Nearly every sale in the last several years, and now many applications for permit to drill, are being challenged in court. Sage grouse-related issues also has their own round of litigation. Let me tell you, the governor and the state government stands ready to assist the federal government in analysis and legal support where we agree. We believe our sage grouse program works. We know how to work with the industry to protect the bird, and we know how to produce oil and gas. We just need the opportunity to do so. Currently, our Attorney General's office is involved in over 30 court cases involving Wyoming natural resources. Many of those are against our neighbor, the federal government. Now, this morning I heard out of DC that inflation is caused by high energy prices. All of you know, high energy prices can be solved by increased production. Not increased production in OPEC countries or Venezuela or even Mexico, although Mexico can help, but more production from here in the US and particularly Wyoming. More production will come from Wyoming if we have a reliable federal partner committed to producing all forms of energy. Unfortunately, I do not see that today. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate this opportunity to work with you. I'd be glad to answer any questions, attempt to answer any questions you might have, whether that be now or wait until your final witness on this subject.
Any questions for Mr. Luthi? Questions? Okay. Mr. Co-Chair.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just not a question so much as a statement. Just want to say I appreciate the governor's efforts to, especially through litigation, to force this sale. I think it's abundantly clear that, the only reason the sale did happen, I think the administration said so itself, is because of the litigation. Basically, they're forced to do it. So I appreciate the governor's leadership on this issue. I seem to remember him going back east and having to sit in front of a panel of U.S. senators, and the questioning from the other side of the aisle was along the lines of, well, why don't you just trust us to do this review? It's only a review. It's only a pause. And I'm glad that he held strong and continued with the litigation. Clearly, it was absolutely necessary. And I just look forward to continuing to work with the governor's office on this vital issue. So if there's anything the legislature can do, we're all ears. I think we have a bill draft that this committee sponsored last year that I think is more relevant than ever that we'll probably be pursuing. But anything else that we could do, we're all ears. Looking forward to working with the executive branch to do what we can to ensure that this vital industry still has a place in our state. So once again, thank you. And if you have any response to that'd be great.
Mr. Luthi?
Chairman, I say thank you. And we are committed to continuing to work with you, and I will let the governor know of your appreciation as well.
Okay. Other questions? Well, Mr. Luthi, I know you were up here in Casper yesterday. You could have just stayed, although that would have entailed you having to beg a trip back to Casper, back to Cheyenne from someone, or hitchhike.
I appreciate that. You do know I was there, Mr. Chairman. I probably should have kept that a secret, but no, it is no secret. But this really did work out well virtually this time. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Luthi. Please hang with us if you would, please. So with that, next up is Colin Mcgee with the Petroleum Association. Pete Obermueller could not make it today, so he sacrificed Colin to the committee. And we won't treat you any different than we would treat Pete. So,
yeah,
Mr. Mcgee, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Pete had other obligations, and so he asked me to stand in his place, so I appreciate you all indulging me. I am not the orator that Mr. Obermueller or Mr. Luthi is, so bear with me, but definitely wanted to give the committee some updates on things we're watching with the BLM. So again, my name is Colin Mcgee. I am the Regulatory Affairs Director for the Petroleum Association. We too were pleased to see that a lease sale occurred. But in light of all of the changes that the BLM made in the lease sale from what was proposed last year to what we saw this year, it was the first time in PAW's history that we submitted comments on the draft EA for the lease sale. And we also submitted a protest letter to the BLM when the lease sale results came out. We did that to try to argue our points that we thought that the BLM should have followed their established sage-grouse prioritization process. And so there would have been those 260 additional parcels included. The use of that state director discretion was vague, and so we didn't know exactly where they were pulling from that, but that took out an additional 61 parcels. And then there were 27 parcels removed for no explanation. So there were a number of things in there that we thought the BLM should have considered since those parcels had been previously, they were previously available for lease, but a lease sale was never held. We didn't understand where the changes were coming from. So nonetheless, as Mr. Luthi said, we were encouraged to see a lease sale occur. Looking forward, so the BLM has to notice a lease sale 45 days before it is to occur. And prior to that, they have to put out a draft EA, which analyzes the lease sale. So for Q3, that just started on July 1. And so roughly 90 days and a quarter. If you include the draft EA 30-day review process and the 45-day notice of intent to hold a lease sale, we're running a couple of days into them needing to issue a draft EA to actually have a Q3 lease sale. One of the things that PAW advocated for in our protest letter was The leases that the BLM was deferring in the Q2 lease sale, since those had all already gone through appropriate NEPA review, that they could use those as the leases to offer for Q3 in lieu of offering any new leases. But like I said, we're running pretty close to a deadline for them to have to start the process to have a Q3 sale. So just to put that on your all's radar. Mr. Chairman, I believe you had mentioned or asked with the lease sale that just occurred, when those leases are issued, if operators can submit APDs, and they can. And actually, operators can submit APDs on every lease that has been litigated for the last 7 years. The BLM issued an instruction memorandum last year that details a process that they can go through to issue an APD if one is submitted on a litigated lease. The short story is they basically just have to make sure the NEPA and the APD stacks up. So those are available. I am not aware, or I'm not sure the extent to which this process is being used in Wyoming. I'm not sure how many operators have submitted APDs on litigated leases. Something the BLM probably has information on, but it is encouraging. It's good to know that there is at least a process that they can go, if the NEPA is sufficient, they can go and develop on those litigated leases. And then the last thing in this tranche, and then I'll get into some just quick updates on litigation. Well, this kind of bridges both, but so there, for a number of years, there's been litigation in the DC Circuit, DC District Court in front of Judge Contreras that has involved greenhouse gas emissions. And that has covered I believe every lease that has been issued in Wyoming since 2015. And right now that amounts to roughly 2,000 leases. The judge recently agreed to let a settlement between Department of Justice and the plaintiffs to go forward. And so the BLM will have to go back and do additional greenhouse gas analysis on all of these leases. And at that time, once that analysis is complete, theoretically, those leases can move forward and be developed unhindered. I will say a number of those leases also have sage-grouse habitat, have been litigated to sage-grouse habitat. So I don't think all the leases would be wholly available, but at least there is a glimmer of hope that some leases from these past year lease sales may become available soon. The BLM has established a framework to more broadly analyze greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think they have a higher level of confidence in the analysis that is in their EAs. So we may see some action on that front. Then next, I'll quickly go through a few of the lawsuits that PAW is kind of tracking, keeping tabs on. So recently, with the normally pressurized Lance project in the Upper Green River Basin, some NGOs had litigated on that, I believe, mainly due to wildlife concerns. That had gone through the federal district court here in Wyoming and was recently decided that the BLM had done sufficient NEPA work. So it was a good victory on that end. Unfortunately, the NGOs have appealed that decision to the 10th Circuit. So we'll have to wait around a little bit longer for that process to go through. PAW joined one of our partner organizations, the Western Energy Alliance, in a lawsuit challenging the BLM's moratorium on quarterly lease sales. That challenge was brought through the Wyoming Federal District Court that ended up with Judge Skavdal, who had a hearing on the case on May 13th. And we went and listened to it. It was a very interesting argument. And I would say Judge Skavdal is a pretty brilliant judge because he gave no indication of which way he was leaning. But we're waiting a decision on that case. and obviously hoping for the best outcome for our oil and gas industry. And then two recent lawsuits that just came about. So the minute the Wyoming BLM started the lease sale, the Q2 lease sale on June 29th, a number of NGOs litigated the leases, and they litigated the lease sales for Wyoming and all the other states that were holding lease sales. The challenge was that they were asserting, the NGOs were asserting that the BLM should have done a cumulative analysis on the greenhouse gas impacts from all of the lease sales, as opposed to doing lease sales or EAs on, for sales in individual states. So we can barely hold a lease sale at this point without it being litigated the minute it starts. So we'll have to kind of just go through that process. The last one that I'll mention, and then be happy to take questions. There was another lawsuit that was just filed by an NGO, a group of NGOs, asserting that the BLM should have done a cumulative impact analysis on all of the APDs issued in Wyoming and New Mexico during President Biden's term. And they're asserting that there's been roughly 3,500 APDs issued between the two states. It's actually just a portion of the two states. 3,500 APDs issued during the last year and a half. And their assertion is that the cumulative greenhouse gas impacts from those APDs are affecting endangered species throughout the country, and that the BLM didn't do sufficient Section 7 ESA consultation and some other things. So that one's a kind of a novel lawsuit, if you will, that we'll be watching. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to, I'll do my best to answer them.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. McGee. My question is revolving around the recent Supreme Court case, the EPA versus West Virginia victory that the coal companies had. It took a long time, I think 9 years, cost us 50,000 jobs in the coal industry, but we finally won. It was a little late, but it's more of a, hey, we won, but all the damage has already been done. Looking at that case, it did kind of open the door through the major questions doctrine for associations like yours, the PAW, to file suit against the BLM and to stop this basically going around Congress on these major issues like climate change, where the BLM is basically acting like Congress and setting policy on greenhouse gases. Has the PAW decided yet if they do you have any lawsuits pending challenging the BLM's authority to do this and basically slow leasing down to a halt to on this greenhouse gas issue? Is there any plans in place to go after that and go on offense? I bet the coal companies wish they would have gone on offense years ago. In the war on coal. Now we got the war on oil and gas, and then we're going to have a war on agriculture. So you guys are next in the crosshairs. What are you doing to protect yourselves and the American people and our energy policy? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have probably about an hour.
Oh. I'm not overly long-winded, so don't worry about that.
It might take that long.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman and Senator, thank you for the question. We're all, PAW, we're excited to see the results of that case, and we sent a press note out the day that it came out. So we were encouraged to see that. As far as whether PAW is involved in any greenhouse gas litigation, I know we partnered with Western Energy Alliance on a couple of lawsuits prior to me getting with PAW, and so I'm not fully up on what those were. The one, again, that I'm most aware of right now is our suit against the BLM on the quarterly lease sales. So we are involved in that. Like I said, there have been a couple of new lawsuits issued, the one on the APDs in particular, where we are examining our options. I don't know if we've made any decisions on what to do there, but that one could have immediate impacts on Wyoming if well, could have immediate impacts on Wyoming. In a broader context, not necessarily just, well, not with greenhouse gases and Department of Interior, but there are a number of other federal rules that we are hopeful the feds take a look at in light of that decision. You know, few that come to mind are from the Security and Exchange Commission, their greenhouse gas reporting rule, one from FERC on greenhouse gas analysis on interstate pipeline projects, and perhaps even WOTUS. So there may be a smattering of things out there that hopefully federal agencies look at and question their work in light of the decision.
Follow-up, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just caution on the hope route. This administration seems to be a catch me if you can mentality, and they're just going to keep doubling down on, you know, they know it's going to take 9 years for the Supreme Court to finally get it right. But the damage is done in the meantime. And I implore you guys, team up with the Attorney General's office and fight back, sue, and try to get this stuff stopped. Trying to play by their rules is going to just put the nail in your guys' coffin. And we'll try to help you as much as we can legislatively, but there's only so much we can do. But I just encourage you guys to fight. I think there's an opening here. I think you guys should take it. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Other questions for Mr. Mcgee? Co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we heard the testimony about the numbers from the BLM, just how, I guess you could say, suppressed the latest oil and gas lease sale was in terms of actual leases that were bought and just the number that were offered to begin with, considering the time frame and everything. And so we know that the royalty rate was increased significantly during this past lease sale. What role did that play in the suppressed appetite for these leases?
Mr. Mcgee?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, actually, I do not know. I don't think we've pinged our members yet to see what specific actions, you know, either gave them pause or you know, I don't have data to back that up, so I couldn't really answer.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just, well, anecdotally, I know that, you know, 1 or 2% usually when you're negotiating a royalty rate in the private sector is a big deal. So 6% seems like a lot. And I have an intuition that maybe that did play a role, but any hard information would be great from your organization to sort of, you know, was it the royalty rate? Was there increase, the increase in the stipulations that gave them pause, or a combination of all those, lack of trust and ability to actually get an APD, you know, in a meaningful time frame. So all those things would be useful as we consider our response from the state's perspective to this new environment that we're in. So all that would be useful. But I also want to, you know, push back on some of the pushback that we've gotten from previous proposals. I'm thinking of Senate File 84 from last year that, you know, we don't have to have a PhD economist necessarily to, you know, agree with us to move forward with a policy proposal that's clearly going to be beneficial for both the industry and the state as far as I'm concerned. So it'd be great if you had some hard and fast numbers, but, you know, fairly certain that, you know, 18% as opposed to 12.5% had a significant role to play.
Yeah,
so,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mcgee?
I would agree with you. I think that certainly gave a number of operators pause. I think likely some of the actions that were taken with sage grouse would also give some concern that what else may happen in general habitat. And I would also just remind the committee that there are a number of other things that Interior intends to do within the leasing program. So, you know, the more immediate actions that we saw in this recent lease sale were I think, just the first couple of steps. But you know, possibly upping bonus bids or you know, rentals or bonding, or, you know, the report that Mr. Spencer mentioned, bless you. The report that Mr. Spencer issued, mentioned that was issued last November, outlines kind of all the routine things that we've heard over the years that BLM, I think, is going to perhaps take a bigger bite at the apple at.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Mcgee.
Thank you.
So with that, I will open it up to public comment on the oil and gas lease issues and various issues. Anybody in the room? Anybody remotely? No? Okay, with that, I'll close public comment. And we are, it's co-chairman.
Well, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'd like to propose a motion that we get a bill draft going along the lines of Senate File 84 for consideration at our next meeting. This bill was the one that would have a proportional reduction, basically based on the severance tax, that would even out, or at least make it revenue neutral for the state. Given that we now know that the royalty rate increase has gone from 12.5% to 18%, if there ever is production on those leases, we know that we'll get an increase in our share, our 49%. And the proposal basically was to make that a credit against the oil and gas company severance taxes, so make sure that we're not becoming any more dependent upon oil and gas than we need to. It also provided some level of stability and predictability for the industry as well. So that's the specific proposal, Senate File 84, have that be the starting point, recognizing there's probably still some more work that needs to be done with the effect that it also has on our local taxes, but that's a proposal to get Senate File 84 going again, the engrossed version from last session.
Okay, seconded by Senator Beitman. Discussion,
Question.
Senator Anderson.
Question, what happened to Senate File 84? I thought we passed that. Did the House not pass it, or what happened?
It died in House Committee. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, somebody who's on the House Committee can maybe explain, but I think, yeah, it was one of those things where, you have to probably ask the House of Merrill's Chairman why that one died.
So other discussion, and on that issue, I think there was a tremendous lack of understanding of what transpired. There were some issues with writing a bill without knowing what the specifics were, because we didn't know it was going to be 18.5%. It was kind of an open-ended bill. So I think those were some of the issues. So other discussion on the bill, on proposed draft, Senator Anderson.
So now, Mr. Chairman, we do know what the percentage is, and we should be able to zero it right in, huh?
Senator, I think that's a very good statement, that we can put specifics into it to do that. And that makes, I think, writing the bill a little more clear than that. So other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? This is just a voice vote on a bill draft. Aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay, motion passes. Brian, do you have that one? And I think, Brian, it's an easy look at to go back and pull Senate File 84 now that we know what the number is. And I know that Senator Boner had a major hand in crafting that. So I'll let you work with the co-chairman, if you would, Mr. Co-Chairman. Please.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one unresolved issue we didn't quite get to is the effect that would have on your local ad valorem taxes. So when you increase your royalty rate, that's deducted from your ad valorem. And so that's one we didn't quite get worked through with the Department of Revenue and the county assessors. So that's something I'll be engaging with both those entities to see if there's something we can come up with. It's hugely complex because there's over 400 different, taxing entities, special districts and so on within the state. So assessing the effect on your local tax revenue, that's something we're going to at least try to take a crack at that. And once again, the goal is providing stability both for state and local government as well as industry. So we'll see what we can do to mitigate the disruptive effects of the increased royalty rate on our state and local government.
Okay. So Brian, when is our next meeting? Is it in September?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's in November.
In November,
Yeah.
okay. So that should give you plenty of time to work on that. Oh, yeah, it's like the first Friday of November, if I'm.
That's correct. I believe the 4th.
4th, 5th, something like that, because it's the day after minerals. Okay, so that should give plenty of time. So if you have input to Brian or the co-chair, give it to them. And that, yeah, and I think that was one of the other issues, is the complexity with our local tax bases. So, okay. So with that, I think we're going to take a 10-minute break or so. We are very far ahead of schedule. Not that we're pushing the schedule or anything, that's just the way things worked out. And I know there are people who wanted to testify who aren't in the room yet this morning. So we'll take a quick break and hopefully they will show up. So.
So the House deal,
Senator Anderson, yes, you're right. It is 10 o'clock. My years on appropriations, that was an appropriations 5-minute break. So we could come back to order. Yeah, I'm on. I guess I need to get closer. I apologize. I forget that these things, you've got to be right on them. So during the break, a concept came up, and I will let Representative McGuire propose that. So Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So several questions came up with regard to wind turbines, the wind turbines that are placed on federal land here in the state of
And
Wyoming.
Representative McGuire, you might have to do the same thing I just did, which is get a little closer to that microphone.
All right.
That's good, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So several questions came up with regard to wind turbines that are located on federal lands here in the state of Wyoming. And I would propose to the committee that we request a white paper from our LSO office that includes, I don't know if it's properly defined as a lease or a rental fee, but whatever the royalty fee is that are paid by the owners of the wind turbines to the federal government, the megawatt fee, how much that is, any impact fees, whether or not there's a reclamation bond, and how reclamation is accounted for, and any mitigation fees for wildlife. Ultimately, the bottom line question is, how many dollars are flowing to Washington, D.C. from the wind turbines that are located on federal lands in the state of Wyoming? And how the citizens of Wyoming will be protected at the end of the useful life of those wind turbines.
Okay, so I don't know that we need to take a vote. That's just a request, Brian. I think you can give that off to one of our research staff if you're clear on what the request is for. So I do know that there is, the state has a requirement for reclamation bonding on wind turbines. I don't know how that carries over onto those that might be on federal land, but I think it would apply. But again, just I think that information caught a lot of us unaware that there is some sort of federal fee, whatever, production tax on those wind turbines. So, and we'll just let you relay that request for. Representative McGuire, do you want that before the next meeting or by the next meeting?
If we could, Mr. Chairman, if we could have that before the next meeting, I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
Okay, so when they can get that, Brian, and then I think we can have a public discussion then at the next committee meeting in November, if that works. But I think we'd all like to see that information when the report is done. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I tried to give us enough time for people to get here. I know people were traveling in on the next topics on railroads in Wyoming, coal production and exports. And I hope everyone that was planning to be here in person is. I see Tom, I see Nathan, and Nathan just left. I think I have that effect sometimes on people in the room. Okay. I know what he did. He went to get notes till he sees what he's supposed to talk about. He's not here. We can publicly embarrass him. Oh, no. Okay. Yes, he is, I believe. No, he's not. Brian, please. So Travis will not be online?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Pat Joyce, from the Wyoming Mining Association is here.
Okay. All right. So another change in the batting order. Okay. So with that, Pat, want to come up and fill us in on the issues and your position from the Mining Association? It's good to see you again. So please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you'd indicate who you are and affiliation for the record, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the time today and all the members. Good morning. Appreciate you taking time to listen to this issue this morning.
Pat, you're probably going to have to get a little closer to the microphone, and that's mostly for those who are watching virtually.
Got it. Is that any better?
That's better.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. My name is Pat Joyce. I'm the Assistant Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. I'm happy to be here today. I am standing in for our Executive Director, Travis Detai, who had planned to be here but was unavoidably detained out of state today. So if you'll bear with me, I will read his written remarks and not wing it today like I can't. So, Mr. Chairman.
I just heard harp music.
Is that mine? That's not mine. It's probably in my bag back there. So,
Is that, Pat, is that your cell phone?
please remove it.
Thank you.
Throw it up
I
against the
forgot to
wall,
give my
whatever works.
speech on cell phones.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, it's nice for the committee. We appreciate
This is
the
a blessed
tone there.
committee, right?
my speech usually is please turn them off unless you're waiting on an organ transplant, either as a recipient or a donor. So at least I'm not confiscating them.
I do.
Pat,
appreciate-
proceed. Now
Thank
that
you.
we've
I
had a little bit
appreciate
of-
that, even though I'm the problem, so I appreciate that. So a reminder to the committee that the Wyoming Mining Association is a statewide trade organization that represents and advocates for 30 mining company members producing bentonite coal, trona, uranium, and lignite, as well as new companies developing gold and rare earth element deposits. Thank you for your time today to visit with you about a significant issue that is impacting our coal producers in the Powder River Basin and the state of Wyoming regarding the availability of trains to move our coal to our out-of-state utility customers. As you are well aware, Wyoming's coal producers rely on timely and efficient rail service to get our product to our utility customers across America. It is a partnership, and I want to be clear up front that I am not here to point fingers or in any way disparage our friends in the rail industry. But the situation we find ourselves in today is more dire than it has been in the past. The unanticipated increase in demand in the late summer, early fall of 2020, largely driven by the significant increase in the price of natural gas, caught us all a little off guard. Coupled with the fact that industry sectors across the board are still dealing with employment issues as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, set all of us scrambling in order to ramp up to meet that increased demand. Mine operators across the PRB are forced to aggressively beef up employment, offering incentives such as hiring bonuses to meet our production needs. The railroads found themselves in a similar situation with their employees. It has been difficult to hire these days, and we empathize. So to bring us to where we are today, we surveyed our operators, mine operators, last month as of May of this year. Percentage of nominations being filled range from 60 to 81% for Railroad A and 35 to 82% for Railroad B as of May of 2022. This is compared to an average of 90 to 95% in good times. What is clear among the operators is inconsistency. Some operators are having more success than others, and our utility customers are struggling with inconsistent shipments as summer energy demands soar. Communications with the two railroads are generally not very good right now. Operators rate communication with Railroad A as fair to good and Railroad B as poor to fair. A common theme is inconsistency, with marketing telling operators one thing and operations saying something else. One operator cites monthly calls with no results. Railroads have cited to operators a number of reasons for the shortfall in available trains, including crew availability and shortages, lack of manpower, particularly in the Nebraska area, and difficulty hiring employees. Trying to bring equipment back online that hasn't been in service for years, and supply chain issues to get parts to bring additional stored locomotives back into service. And I understand that that is being remedied today since even our calls with our mines. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that later. let's see. There's also unanticipated demand for service and all commodities, driving need for additional resources exceeding available supply and power shortages. Also, we are very aware that this September, a possible labor dispute with railroads could make an already major problem become much worse. Again, that's as far as we'll go on that. But finally, some general industry observations from our operators. The trains are not coming in due to crews not being available, seems to be the greatest problem. Second is they're slow to balance out a load to empties following impacts such as weather events, maintenance, et cetera. An imbalanced network that leaves little to no traffic one day and heavy traffic the next. Back to the inconsistency. Utility customers that are conserving coal because they will run out if they don't. A hot summer could be very bad for the electrical system in some states. According to the National Coal Transportation Association, utility coal stockpiles are at their lowest levels since 1972.
So, Ms. Joyce, just a question on that. I apologize for interrupting you. And normally, I know most power plants try to keep at least a month's supply on hand. And you say they're low. What would you say is kind of the average stockpile right now?
You know, I would be happy to get back to you with a more accurate answer on that. My estimation at this point is 2 to 3 months. So,
Okay, thank you.
That's not factual. I would be happy to get that answer for you.
Okay,
and bring it
thank you.
back. You're welcome. Rumors of workforce organizing specific days or weekdays to take off to slow production and cycling of trains, specifically in western Nebraska. That's one of our responses from our mines, and I don't have a background on that one. Railroads have told operators that they expect to get worse considering that they can't hire any people and they are now in vacation season. So we're all in the same boat. So industry frustration with both railroads, no demand would pick up and didn't get out ahead of it, having crews and power in place at the beginning of the year. Some operators are revising production projections downwards. Lower production will lead to lower revenues for the state and local governments. In conclusion, the frustration level of the Wyoming coal operators is very high right now. Given strong market demands, demand and prices, we should be having a very good production year. Operators have ramped up to meet the demand and take advantage of a very good market and are stymied by the fact they cannot move the coal. The impact is being felt in my company's bottom lines, especially given high operating costs due to the unprecedented inflation. And the impact will be felt in revenue generation to the state as well as local governments as production levels struggle because of these railroad disruptions. I realize there's no easy solution to this problem, and there's no industry ask for this committee other than your attention to help us find a path forward and constructive dialogue with our railroad partners. But we feel it's imperative that the state's elected leadership are made aware of the problem and its implications for Wyoming in the near term. Okay, he has one update for you as well. He'd like, Travis has asked that we give a brief update to the committee on the issue of coal exports. To date, there is no movement on the efforts to expand terminal capacity on the American West Coast for coal exports. We do continue to move some tons off the West Coast, the Vancouver, British Columbia port, an estimated 7 million tons, most of that out of Montana. However, there are concerns with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau's announcement that Canada will ban coal exports, that this may soon cease to be an option for us as well. We do have companies exploring export opportunities through the Gulf of Mexico at this time. Is that, Mr. Chairman? Those are conclusion of Mr. Detai's comments, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, questions? Senator Beitman, then Senator Anderson, and
on down the line.
Okay, nothing from the representatives.
Okay, we'll wake them up here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Joyce. My question, I don't think I heard the last part about did you say Gulf of Mexico or Mexico?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
Mr. Beitman, yeah.
Curious about both, actually. So follow up.
Follow up?
Yeah. You know, obviously Canada's not gonna probably play ball with us anymore. They're gonna take their ball and go home with regard to coal. So what's the Mexican government's attitude towards coal? Is there an opportunity to open up maybe Baja California as an option, as a deep sea port to get our coal to countries like India that really want it, and East Asia? So has the Mining Association been working with exploring options as far as, you know, opening up Mexican ports in regards to getting our coal overseas? Thank you.
Ms. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, the Mining Association, Mr. Detaille and myself are neither one involved in the exploration of that. These are our individual mining companies that are exploring that. We will obviously, if asked, come alongside them and do additional research. But as of today, it's the individual mines that are looking at this. So be happy to follow up with the committee later, or you individually, with the results that they find on that. So.
Another follow-up?
Yeah, on that point, I have spoken to other legislators from states like Arizona and Utah, and we're all in agreement that we're willing to work on interstate compact to help make this happen, but we need some input from you guys as to whether or not you even want it, if it will be helpful. But I think it would be helpful to get our product to where it's needed, and if we can pull something together with an interstate compact with those states to get rail lines in place and a seaport in place with Mexico, let's do it. So let us know what you need.
Okay. Ms. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, we appreciate that. That's part of why we're here today, to make this issue, you all aware of this issue, and of course the rest of the legislature. We are looking for any avenue that we can. And at this point, and I agree, I think our northwestern options are getting more and more dim. And I think that we do need to back up and resolve the issue a different way. So appreciate your support.
Okay, so Ms. Joyce, I'll interrupt Senator Anderson quickly for a minute. I remember having a discussion with officials from the Mexican government, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, about a coal terminal in Baja, and they were working on it. So we would ask that the Mining Association research that issue where it stands, if there's anything we can do to help, and if you'd be ready to follow up at our November meeting. Could you do that?
Mr. Chairman, we would be happy to do that. And I may get with you aside later and see if you still have your contacts, and
Okay.
that would help my research speed along a little more, but I would be very interested in doing that, and we would report.
And for the committee and that, I've also been in contact with officials from the Canadian government. And while that is their stated position, they have done nothing statutorily to prohibit coal shipments. So my understanding is they'll continue until the Trudeau government does something one way or the other. I think we were also shipping some coal out of Prince Rupert up there, which is, I believe, the deepest port on the West Coast. And they have a very robust coal shipping facility. And it's the issue of, am I correct, that it's the issue of transportation cost, getting it there?
Up into Canada, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, yes. Up into Canada, there are, I've had conversations in the last year with the consulate who's stationed in Denver, who almost, when I explained this issue to him, this has probably been 8 or 9 months ago, probably longer than that, time flies, was almost surprised that we were having trouble getting our coal out the west coast. And he had indicated at that time he would work with us to try to open up some more avenues for coal transportation going up through Canada. So I think it's probably time to hold him to that account at this point.
So, Ms. Joyce, has the Mining Association looked at shipping coal out of the Port of Oakland California. I understand California has issued a permit to ship coal out of that port, but the city of Oakland is now stepped in and is blocking those shipments. If you would research that issue also, please.
Mr. Chairman, we do have some background on that. It needs to be updated, but that was my understanding as well. We did have, I don't know, so one or two that I can remember of our minds that were looking at that, and then some other individuals who were more consultants in that in the industry trying to find product to send to Asia, and they were just certain that that was going to work, and then we also found out that was blocked. So
Okay. So with that, Senator Anderson, you were next. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any idea of what the production loss is of the lack of trains? Say
Ms.
in a
Joyce?
month or a year?
Ms. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I don't have actuals here with me today, but that wouldn't take very much to get a hold of, and we'd be happy to share that with you. This has been a moving target, as you can imagine. We thought we were on the downhill slide, and then the demand has increased, thankfully, and our mines are doing everything they can to get those contracts ordered, or not ordered, filled. And so at this point, we haven't asked them for specifics, but certainly we could do that.
Mr.
Follow-up?
Chairman, yes, please. I've got some information. I had a meeting with a major coal company, U.S. coal company here in Casper the other day. And that India market, they intend on using the Mississippi for that market. They claim they don't want to go off the West Coast for India. It's a lot cheaper for them to go through. And I was surprised to hear them say they might go right off the Gulf for that instead of, before they were going to take it to the Mississippi on rail and then take it down the Mississippi on barges. They said, no, they're going to go right to sea barges. The other thing, they were not pleased with the Baja option. And I've been after that Baja option for 20 years. And they are not wanting to do the Baja. So I don't know. The problem we have is whether it's the Baja or Oakland or any of them, is they're too small. We need 100 million tons. And every one of those is 1 or 2 or 7 or something, and not enough. So I don't know, and maybe you have some information on a larger export facility, West Coast or anywhere, that could take our kind of production.
Ms. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I think that is the exact problem on all of our West Coast options is size of infrastructure. There would be required, an additional cash incentive from someone to increase the size, the availability, and just being allowed to come in there. So we've got politics and we've got money and we've got size. And I think those are 3 challenges we have to walk through.
Okay. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, I'm glad to hear what Senator Anderson said about Mississippi, but why are we continually, maybe you don't know, but it would be good to know why we're trying to deal with these foreign countries or our neighboring countries when they aren't too interested, when we have these seaports in Texas, and I'll bet you money they'd take them, take this coal and ship it out of here and be glad to do it. And maybe Mississippi is the answer. I don't know, but it just seems to me that we keep going after the same, on the same efforts, and they don't seem to be very productive. And so, do you know anything about Texas and why we're not shipping it down there? I talked to the governor about this before, and he referred me to the Baja, and that doesn't seem like much of a good deal. So do you have any information on Texas at all?
Ms. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, I don't, but not today with me, and I would say we would have to do more research on that area. I think we need to discuss with the railroads what the options are of getting there. We have to look at logistics. We have to look at infrastructure. There's several steps I think that have to be enhanced before we could actually make that work. But at this point, we're all hands on deck to figure it out. So I won't tell you to call Baja.
Thank you.
Other questions? Questions? Okay, so thank you, Ms. Joyce. If you would stay with us, because at the end of this session, I have one question for all the parties involved. So if you would just hang with us and,
Step back or stay?
yeah, just,
Step back, okay.
yeah, go back. We have a number of people who want to testify. And my question isn't that onerous. Don't get all upset. Anybody who's here, they, oh, gee, what's he have planned? So after that, we have Matthew Jones with BNSF. Matt, come on up. And again, please identify yourself for the record and who you represent. And that's mostly for the recorded version and for the people watching remotely.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Matt Jones.
Oh, Mike, there we go. It'll turn green. Up, try it again. There you go.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Matt Jones, Executive Director, Public Affairs for BNSF Railway. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I want to say thank you to Ms. Joyce and the members of the Wyoming Mining Association for expressing their current frustration. And frankly, I want to say that BNSF Railway is not satisfied currently with our level of service. We're not meeting the expectations of our customers, and we're not meeting our own expectations. I think you've all heard a lot of the reasons for the current supply chain disruptions that have been ongoing for more than a year now, and BNSF and the U.S. rail network has been impacted by that. And then that's been compounded by other weather-related and other service interruptions that when you have a currently stressed network, and then you have a major weather event or something that you can typically work through, it has been much more difficult to restore the service levels on the network to where we want them to be. So again, we know that we have important work to do, and we are 100% committed to doing that. So BNSF is currently engaged in a service recovery effort. And there are three primary components to that. The first is hiring. Like almost every other industry, other industry that I've heard about, we've experienced an increase in attrition. It's more difficult to hire currently. And so we've got a very aggressive hiring program. We plan to hire 3,000 employees this year. And 1,700 of those will be train crew employees, transportation employees. And we're using incentives, hiring incentives. We're also using relocation incentives for existing employees to get them to critical areas on our network, including the Powder River Basin, to make sure that we get the manpower to the places where we need them most. So that's a key component of it. As Ms. Joyce mentioned, availability of power has been an issue. Since this winter, we brought 350 additional locomotives online. We currently have, recently completed lease arrangements for an additional 75 locomotives to get those in service to make sure that we have the power available and where it needs to be. And then finally, we're working with our customers, one, to make sure that we're communicating effectively and regularly, so they understand, what the conditions are on the network. They can, plan given the current conditions. And then where we have unproductive inventory on the network or rail cars on the network, how can we get those off the network to free up capacity so the car, the trains that we do need to get moving are able to operate more fluidly. So it's somewhat counterintuitive, but when you have a seriously congested roadway, whether it's a rail roadway or highway, you need to get some of that inventory or cars off the network in order to speed up the movement of the rest of the traffic. So we're looking at those opportunities, and we're willing to talk to all of our customers about creative solutions to improve operation on the network. So again, we're 100% committed to this. We understand the frustration of the Wyoming Mining Association membership. We've moved 5% more coal year to date than we did last year, but demand is strong right now. And so nominations, the amount of coal that our customers want to move is up significantly. And I think those numbers that Ms. Joyce mentioned are what their expectations are, or what they would like to be moving this year. But we have moved through the month of June 5% more coal than we did last year. But we're not satisfied with that. We want to move more coal, and we're going to do everything it takes to do that. It will be excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, one question on that 5% more is Montana and Wyoming, or is that just Wyoming centric?
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I believe that is from the Powder River Basin as a whole. So that would include Montana as well as Wyoming.
Okay, please proceed.
I will wrap it up with that to allow enough time for my colleague from Union Pacific. If that's okay.
Fine. So other questions for Ms. Jones? Mr. Jones? Okay, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I just wanted to comment with a question. I feel your pain flying over from here to past Rosette. You guys had a massive number of locomotives, I have no idea, that were side railed when the market collapsed. And I've seen that some of them are being put back into service, but that's, as a business owner, I know how the fixed cost works to take equipment and park it, waiting for the market to come back. And as you mentioned, you don't just put them on the rail tomorrow, you have to train those crews and bring them back up to speed. So I just wanted to comment, or as a question to the committee, it's not for lack of equipment that I see. To me, it looks like a manpower question at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, though we do have a significant number of locomotives located at Donkey Creek. I believe it's about 350 locomotives right now. We've brought as many locomotives out of service or into service as we can from that location. And we've looked at all of those locomotives, and in part due to the inability to get parts because of the supply chain challenges, we have not been able to restore some of those locomotives to service. And that's why we've taken the extra effort to go out on the lease market and lease an additional 75 locomotives to get them in service as soon as possible due to the challenges of getting parts to bring some of those locomotives back to service.
Okay. Well, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the efforts and, coming before this committee to detail, the challenges that we're all facing, I think. Just a question, have you heard any similar concerns from any of your other customers? Would you say there's been a corresponding increased demand for their products? Are you similarly situated in your inability to fulfill those demands? Just give us a little greater context in terms of how the coal market is compared to some of the other customers that you're servicing.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, yes, other customers have expressed frustration with the current level of rail service from BNSF and, I think is a national network. It's not limited to the Powder River Basin or the coal industry. So as an industry overall, I think it's fair to say that we're all very focused on this and working to address the concerns of our customers. And when we talk about not meeting our customers' expectations, we mean all of our customers.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And that's, I think it's important for us to remember that, but also understand the importance of coal to our local economies, to our tax structure. And so, if there's anything that the state can do to help along, I know that you're federally regulated, but if there's anything the state can do to help along these challenges, just let us know. Can't promise results, but I know we've, for example, the governor has lifted weight limits, for example, on hay before for agriculture, things like that. So we're here to help as well. Appreciate you coming and working to resolve this issue. But like I said, if there's something the state can do to help you along, just let us know.
Mr. Chairman, Senator.
Mr. Jones, please.
Thank you very much for that offer. And, one of the important things that I mentioned is recruiting right now. And so we are reaching out to localities, local job services across our network. Some of the state organizations have good resources, and we're exploring all of those to make sure that we're doing everything we can to utilize the state and local resources to get the word out about the great jobs that exist in the railroad industry.
Okay, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm surprised to hear you're having trouble hiring people since you're represented by a union and they furnish you those people at will. They've testified before us many times that they are able to fill your needs for all your jobs. And I'm just wondering what has fell through there. The other thing is I'm using 3 as a train set. So I'm estimating that you have put back to service about 135 train sets. Is that all in the Powder River Basin, that 135? And wouldn't that seem like that's about enough to take care of the business?
Mr. Joyce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, those locomotives they're not associated with a certain train set. We actually need the power for the existing car inventory on the network. I believe we're operating approximately 280 coal sets on BNSF right now.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for being here today. Back to the employment issues. My first question is, does BNSF still have a COVID vaccine mandate for their employees?
Okay, Mr. Jones? Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess I'll get my follow-up in there after that. And if not, how many employees quit when you did have a vaccine mandate, and were you able to get most of them back? Because I remember back when we did our special session to try to stop the employer mandates, a lot of the people reaching out to me were railroad employees, for instance, and they were really concerned about being mandated to get the jab, and they didn't want to, and they were going to be forced to choose between their job and their bodily autonomy. So curious to know if that's an issue, if it's still an issue ongoing, if you're having recruitment issues, if you still do have a vaccine mandate, and what you guys are going to do about it. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, so BNSF and other railroads were deemed to be federal contractors under the federal executive order requiring vaccines for employees of federal contractors. I haven't been following that very closely recently. It hasn't come up. I believe that executive order has been stayed by a federal court. And so, we are not subject to that currently. Right? So I believe the answer is no. And but I don't know a number of how many employees might have quit at the time that we were subject to that. And we're getting very close to the point where, that order was going to kick in and require all employees to be vaccinated. But I've never seen a number put on that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Jones, thank you. If you would wait with us for a while, and we'll give your competitor the hot seat. And he has the benefit of being able to answer all the questions that you were asked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Would you like me to stay at the table, or?
Why don't you just take a seat, and then I'll ask you and Ms. Joyce to come back up here shortly. So, Mr. Anderson, it does not matter, but you can turn that other one off and turn that one on. Too many open mics, we get a lot of feedback. So identify yourself and who you represent, please.
I'm Nathan Anderson. I represent Union Pacific Railroad as the Senior Director of Public Affairs in the Mountain States, including the great state of Wyoming. Okay. I'm open to feedback, whether from microphone or from the committee.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Union Pacific Railroad is committed to restoring fluidity to our network and supporting a safe and efficient transportation solution for all of our customers. We are not satisfied with our performance thus far this year, and we realize that we are in the process of making strides to improve that. We have not yet arrived where we need to be. We've made improvements May over April, June over May, and now into July. These network improvements come amid some sectoral growth, including handling nearly 15% more coal than we did at this point last year, primarily driven by the increases in Wyoming's Powder River Basin. Now, make no mistake, we very much want to handle more of the available business and are taking the steps necessary to be able to do so. We've heard the concerns of our customers across industry and across our network. We especially understand the impact to jobs and the state and state revenues here in Wyoming. However, given the supply chain challenges, it's important that we not overwhelm the network and create more congestion, slower trains, more asset imbalance, and ultimately less traffic capacity, which means fewer loads. So I want to provide a glimpse into some of the things that some of the challenges we have and some of the solutions we have implemented to move past those challenges, through and past those challenges. And I want to reiterate that these are network-wide challenges. They're impacting customers across industry, across commodities, across our network. Congestion, crew availability, power or locomotive availability, and then the normal network volatility that we experience for construction and maintenance, severe weather, service issues, and other interruptions. On an equipment front, we have taken the initiative to remove UP-controlled cars from our network. This reduction of what we call active inventory helps reduce congestion. Marketing and sales, our commercial wing, is working with our entire customer base to reduce active inventory. This is the equivalent, as Matt said, of getting cars out of a crowded intersection, or out of, if there's a wreck, you move cars around. You don't stand them all up behind the incident. It'd be the same as diverting water away from an already overflowing river or creek. You don't want to flow more water into that if you can avoid it. We've removed 7% of UP-controlled cars from our active inventory, and it's working. Car velocity is up about 8%. On the employee front, we've begun some aggressive hiring initiatives, as well as work structure alignment projects. Our workforce resources team has some innovative solutions, and they're working as well. We have an employee referral program with incentives. We call it Great People Know Great People, and it's true. Statistics show that most people find a job because of someone they know who can point them in the right direction. Second chance hiring is a recruiting effort that we are piloting beginning in the southern part of the United States, where we look at those who, due to certain past indiscretions or criminal records we hadn't previously considered. Statistics also show, excuse me, that nonviolent offenders who have gone 3 to 4 years without committing another crime have no more likelihood of committing another crime than an average citizen of the country. High school recruitment. We start talking about career opportunities before students leave school. Our partners produce a comprehensive suite of products and services designed to keep people in school through graduation, while meanwhile connecting them with employers and post-secondary education. And we're leveraging technology. For instance, we're using pre-recorded interviews via a mobile platform to meet a new generation of employees where they are technologically, finding candidates where they are, and improving the speed to offer time. On the recruitment front, one of the questions that was asked of my counterpart, Mr. Jones, was what are we doing specifically in this area? I'm pleased to say that a senior recruiter from our team will be at Cheyenne Frontier Days. We'll have a booth. She's also going to be meeting with community college and private trade school officials to find ways that we can further partner together to address pipeline needs and pipeline development for employees. Overall, we're on, maybe slightly ahead of our current 2022 hiring goals. As we've discussed, it's a very tight labor market, and railroading is a unique work environment. We have a 14-week training cycle to get a new hire trained and certified. Now, that doesn't include the recruiting, the vetting, and official hiring process, and then waiting for that training class to start. What we've done, however, is addressed that whole process to streamline it, to streamline the whole hiring process I mentioned with the online interviews, the training cycle, where we have added trainers to speed up the training, offering larger and also more frequent classes, but still maintaining the student-teacher ratios. We have 540 train crew hires in training currently. They're expected to graduate in early October. 411 have already graduated from January through June, and our goal for this year is approximately 1,400 train engine yard employees. And while those new hires and trainees are coming online and becoming certified to operate in the rail environment, we are deploying crews to eliminate. We're deploying crews strategically to eliminate some of those congested areas. Specifically to try to eliminate recrews. So recrew is where the previous crew was not able to complete the work during the assigned work during their shift. Now you have to get crew 2 to finish crew 1's work. That creates congestion, which leads to more crew need, which can result in more congestion. It's a vicious cycle, right? We want to address those issues and create a virtuous cycle so that we have sufficient crews. We're addressing the congestion issues, and we are moving the network, our terminals, more fluidly, more efficiently. From an existing labor standpoint, our workforce resource team and our labor relations team have been working aggressively with our unions to address some temporary agreements and put in place temporary collective bargaining agreements that allow things like location-specific benefits and bonuses, assigned job schedule modifications, and even vacation buyouts to keep crew bases in place. On the locomotive front, we've added 150 locomotives that are now available to our network, and we've reduced the number of borrow-out locomotives. On the margins where railroads interchange, we'll often interchange locomotives, and we have a statistical model for how each railroad is compensated for that. It's called horsepower hours. We have traditionally been a net supplier to the industry, but even that net supply is out of balance. So we're working closely with our other railroads that we interchange with to address that and get that supply back in balance so that we have sufficient locomotives for our needs. Now, we're also looking to add additional locomotives because we see forecast for additional volume in late 2022 and into 2023 across industries, across our network. That's going to also require us to hire additional mechanical forces to maintain and keep those in running force. So we are employing those same, some of those same techniques and technologies in mechanical hiring that I talked about previously in train and yard. At the grassroots level, we are focused on execution, on-time departure, consistency, getting the work done when it's supposed to be done, where it's supposed to be done. Those recovery steps are working. We've reduced operating car inventory by 6 to 7% overall. We're maintaining terminal fluidity. Our dwell time is down about 9%. We're improving our crew availability amidst the hiring. Our recrew rate is down about 28% since our April peak. We're focused on asset utilization and terminal efficiency by modifying our transportation plans, where we can find areas where we touch cars a fewer number of times, where we combine trains to take advantage of available crews, and where we bypass terminals with blocks of cars that don't need to have work done at those terminals. And our freight car velocity has increased, as I mentioned, about 8%. So the metrics are headed in the right direction. Are we satisfied? As I started out by saying, no, we're not. Holidays, service outages, fires, and reroutes and other weather issues have impacted us. But overall, we're seeing the recovery continue as measured by month-over-month improvements in our key operating metrics. We'll continue to watch through the third quarter, and we'll look at our network and we'll add equipment and traffic as the network is ready to take on additional volume. If we add too much to the network before it can absorb it, we'll ultimately handle less. And that's nothing that we want to see. We're committed to improving our operating efficiency. We're committed to maintaining a safe and efficient transportation solution for our freight customers. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have. As in one note, Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of subject matter experts online on Zoom, Brad Moore, Jacob Thomas, from our marketing and sales and customer care. If there are questions that you ask that I don't have answers to, perhaps we could bring them online.
We can do that. So any questions for Mr. Anderson? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on the 150 more locomotives. Were those from storage that you had around the U.S., or are those some of those new purchases?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anderson.
Senator Anderson, those are a combination of locomotives from storage and the bringing the balance back that were borrowed out back to our network, that were borrowed out to other locomotives, the other railroads back to our network. Those are not net new purchases.
Other questions? Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it wouldn't be fair if I didn't ask you the same question I asked your colleague on your competitor, I guess I would say. Going back to the COVID mandates, did you guys keep track of how many employees you lost due to the mandate? And did you get some of them back after the Supreme Court put the stay on the federal mandate? Kind of what's the situation there? And one thing I forgot to ask Bnsf was, as another question, to what extent does ESG play in this kind of reshaping of the rail industry? Are you guys cutting back purposely to try to increase your ESG score, or is that non-existent? I'm worried that, this whole push on climate alarmism is affecting supply chains, it's affecting how we do business, obviously it's affecting our core industries. Hopefully it's not affecting you guys as far as being able to do what you do best, is get the freight from one place to another. So those are a couple of bigger questions, but appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, I'm going to start with the vaccine mandate question. We do not have a vaccine mandate as a condition of employment. I am not familiar with numbers of employees who may have left the industry or whether they came back. I can ask our workforce team if they can provide any data on that. I am familiar with one employee who indicated he was going to leave our employment on a point of personal priority over the vaccine mandate when it was in place, before it was stayed. My understanding was he ended up not leaving. And other than that, I don't have any specific information. On the ESG question, if I may, you mentioned a couple different aspects of ESG can I get you to clarify specifically what you're looking, what aspect of ESG you're curious about, and maybe elaborate on your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Beitman.
Just broadly speaking, I mean, a lot of companies are being pressured into ESG from above. I know it's a top-down push, and it's affecting, you know, their profitability, their operations, how they do business, to try to placate the radical environmentalists. So is that a cause of some of these supply chain disruptions with the railroads, or is that not an issue? Is ESG there but not causing you guys to maybe hold back on running locomotives because you're worried about emissions and things like that? How does it all play in with the railroads?
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Beitman. I think the best way I can answer that is to say that railroads have a common carrier obligation. So whatever is properly tendered to us, we have an obligation to move. And that is a federal requirement under our regulatory environment. We are looking at ways to manage our environmental footprint. And we're proud of the things we've done that have improved air quality and so forth. Rail is already the cleanest way to move freight in the world in terms of the bulk that we're talking about. We produce fewer emissions than other modes. And while we're going to continue to take important and appropriate steps to say, can we do it better? Our first priority right now is to move the freight that is available to us, that our customers expect us to move. Our customers are our lifeblood. Moving the material, the equipment, the goods that they have from where they are to where they need to be, that's our business model. There's no effort underway to reduce the amount of shipments. And frankly, right now, locomotive availability is not our key challenge, right? Reducing the congestion, having enough employees to run the trains efficiently, that's our big issue. Because just like a retailer, if you can turn your inventory faster, you can do twice the business with half the square footage. So even given the exact amount of assets that we have deployed today, if we can improve our velocity even by 1 mile per hour, we end up with the same impact as trying to add more assets in, more locomotives, more crews, more cars into the network. And the better business model is to say, can we run the efficient and safe network at a level where we don't have to keep adding new assets in? We can take care of the ones we have, absorb the ones that come on from other sources, and continue to move our customers' freight at expected levels.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for both companies. Over the past few years, we've been discussing a lot about two-man crews and that kind of thing. And now you're telling me you don't have enough employees to run the train sets that you need to run. Is that an opening for autonomous train sets that we should be pursuing?
Mr. Anderson, and I would invite Mr. Jones to come on back up to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If the two of you will sit next to each other, I assume you will, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Anderson. We have had a lot of discussion about crew size. That is something that's currently under negotiation at a federal level. Those negotiations are in a cooling off period right now. And so I'm gonna tell you that much, and I'm not gonna comment further on those negotiations. I will say that in terms of technological advance, we should be looking at that. We're looking at technological advance in every other industry. And we're looking at it in other aspects of our industry. And to the extent that the state or the legislature can be supportive of broad investigation of new technologies, new operating concepts, I think we should be open and willing to have those discussions. We certainly are.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman, I will just say that Nathan answered that exactly as I would have. It's subject, it's in the current bargaining round, we're talking about crew size is one of the issues. And then when it comes to technology, you shouldn't be limiting the modes of transportation that are able to explore new and safer, better means of technology.
Right. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, it's interesting, the trucking industry is looking hard at autonomous machines and using the Interstate 80 for some of that and testing some of it now. And I don't think they run into the same problems that you're running into, because they really are out of personnel for operating those machines. So I don't know. I think it's pretty open for everybody right now. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? So, okay. So, Mr. Anderson, you'd indicated you're looking at using some people who have been in prison for nonviolent crimes, and would you be willing to come back to the committee at a later date and give us a rundown on how that's working for you? The reason I ask that is where I live, Rawlins is home to Wyoming State Penitentiary, and I know there are numerous people who are in there 2 to 4 years for nonviolent crimes, frankly, drug crimes. Some of them through no fault of their own, but they got caught in the system. And when they get out, they have a terrible time finding jobs. That's just a fact of life. So I'd be interested in an update later, if you can do that, on how that's working and the potential to tap into that potential labor market.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to come back to you when we have some data to share. Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
How long do you think, Mr. Anderson, it would, your study, your trial?
So our pilot, Mr. Chairman, our trial, our pilot program started in late December or in December of 2021. Let me return to my workforce resource team and find out what kind of data we have and communicate back to you when might be an appropriate time for a report.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Anderson, more of a, not so much related to coal, how are you doing with Trona shipments, which tend to be kind of a stable bright spot in Wyoming's economy year after year? Are you meeting their needs?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have specific data on Trona. I know that the volume continues to be a good base of business in our Green River terminal, and we treat that with the same, I guess, desire, respect, whatever. I don't know what the right word is, but it's business that we want, and we want to take care of it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay. So, Ms. Joyce, I'd ask that, I know you're getting a drink of water, that's fine. If you would come back up and join us at the table, please. So I kind of have a question for all of you, and I'd like all of your input. Okay. So kind of a multi-tiered question on that. And so we've got a lot of information, which is great. I think we understand the issue in that. So I guess my questions would be along the line of, how do we work to solve this problem? And how do we work together? And what help, if any, you might need from the state? I look at this as, kind of a market issue more than it is a statutory issue. So all of your thoughts on that, please. Okay, I will let Mr. Jones go first. There, I solved that question.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for that question. I think, having as much communication with our customers and with the producers as possible to, one, make sure that any party isn't caught unawares of developing conditions as they might change, but also to explore, innovative solutions. And we are absolutely open to that. And, we have been doing our best to communicate as much as possible with our customers and as well with the producers. And if they're, I would just ask Ms. Joyce here if she's hearing that isn't happening and isn't happening you know, isn't producing results, to please let us know so we can, you know, deal with the individual that may need better communications or from BNSF. And in terms of the state, I'll just say that, you know, we've also heard from Governor Gordon. He has offered, you know, to be of assistance wherever the state can help as well. And I'll continue to think about that. I'm thinking, you know, as we've ramped up our recruitment efforts, there may be additional opportunities that we could use state, work with state job services or other enterprises in order to get the word out. And so if you don't mind, I'll get back to you if I have more details on that front.
All right. Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll echo what Mr. Jones said. I will say as well that, you know, innovative hiring is something that we're, you know, innovative recruiting is something that we're looking for. So anything you can do from a state level to enhance that, state-sponsored job fairs, coordinated efforts between the community college network, trade schools, et cetera. Like I said, like I mentioned in my comments, we are we're pursuing some of that already. More is better. I'll also say I spent 11 and a half years in our commercial team before I moved into my current role. And I know that sometimes a customer can hear one thing from marketing and sales, the commercial side, and hear something different from the operating side. And often in my experience that happened is that marketing sales is talking about what's going on generally, and operating is talking about what's the critical issue at the tactical level of that car or train or customer facility. And I would just make sure, I would just request that as we continue the open dialogue, that when those kind of discrepancies in messaging come along, that they continue to be, that dialogue continue to be open, that it continue to be, based in let's find a solution, and which Ms. Joyce did a great job of explaining why that was their goal, to find a solution, not to point blame. And we appreciate the opportunity to continue to have that dialogue.
Okay. Ms. Joyce.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. At this point, I always like to offer solutions rather than just pointing the finger. And of course, we intended not to point the finger at our partners in dispersing our product across the country. One of my other hats that I wear within the Wyoming Mining Association is, several of you probably remember that I work a lot with career and technical education training. And that's probably one of our highest priorities is training our workforce for our mines. And I always like to say that those skills can be transferred across company or industry lines. Whether you learn how to work in the mines first, you probably will pick up skills you can learn to use in construction and oil and gas, and I would dare say in a lot of the jobs that the railroads use. I would offer at this point, the Wyoming Mining Association, of course, operates under the antitrust clause, and so we can't put all of our operators in the same room and with the railroads and say, we're going to talk price. We're not going to talk price. But if we could talk logistics, and if we could be the umbrella organization that would maybe pull a meeting together and invite you all, of course, we would be willing to do that. I think at this point, communication is our best asset, and we'd be happy to offer any kind of help that we could to get this thing moving.
Okay. All right. So I think those are, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, my history goes back to 1972 when Amex Bel Air just opened up. I've heard this problem with the railroads for the last 50 years. Always blaming the railroad that they don't have enough train sets and they can't get their product out. And I've seen them do incredible things to make that happen. And I think 185 total train sets out of the Powder River Basin additional is really doing something about it. My recent meeting with the president and 3 vice presidents of a major coal company in the US said that they were really pleased with your efforts. That, you know, I said, are they doing what they should be doing? And they said, yes, they are. and we're beginning to see some relief from that. They mentioned the congestion and other things, but they seemed to think that they were getting enough train sets. So obviously what you're doing is producing some results. So thank you.
Other questions? Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, I'm not hearing any really areas where we can help you. I haven't heard any regulatory issues you may be dealing with. I haven't heard of any challenges that we can help you with. But please let us know between now and our next meeting if there are some issues. We can get some bill drafts going. If there's regulatory relief you need, let's get it done. Start identifying some choke points that maybe are caused by maybe past laws that were well-intentioned but may have turned out to be harmful. Let's go ahead and get those fixed. That's why you guys are here. So think about that before our next meeting. Thanks.
All right, and so no other questions? So I'm looking at the backdrop in here, and most people don't realize this building was built on an old railroad station site. And we carried that theme over through with the decorations in the room, the murals that are painted on the committee room windows. And I think, you know, the railroads, mining have always been part of Wyoming's economy, and we want to keep it that way. I think I told one of you one time, I live in Rollins. And people they will kind of live anywhere, they'll work anywhere, but they're really particular about what happens to them after they're dead. I know that sounds strange, but if you go through the Rollins Cemetery, the number of people who have worked for the railroad who on their tombstones have images of the railroad, the logo from the railroads and that sort of thing. And I think that speaks highly of the work the railroads have done. There are also people there are a couple with drag lines on their tombstones. So their jobs have been important to them, and I'd encourage you to keep the conversation open. I think anyone on this committee would be glad to join you if you need that kind of, I guess you could call it muscle if you get together, although I don't see any need at this time for any legislative action, as Senator Beitman referred to, and think that maybe you're all going down the right path of talking. And a lot of times, that's probably the biggest thing to do, is continue the discussions and conversations and make sure they happen among the right people. So if you'd hang with us, I'll open this to public comment. Anyone in the room? Anyone in the room? Okay, someone in the room? Oh, okay. And anyone on Zoom? Who do we have on Zoom who wants to actually speak on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have Brett Moline and Brian Reentz.
Okay, so we'll take them in order. I'll start with Brett, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been called much worse in my life. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yes, a little loud, but we can hear you fine.
I tend to talk loud. I apologize for that. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. I guess one of the points I want to make, I'm glad to hear that we are making progress. It's not so much of a problem for moving my ag commodities in Wyoming, but I want to iterate that we're having a lot of problems in the Midwest getting deliveries of our inputs in and then getting our commodities moved out. Now with harvest season going on, that's going to become even more critical to get our wheat, corn, and other crops moved. And I'm glad to see there's progress being made, but it seems like the progress has been pretty darn slow. And I'm hoping that progress can get sped up. I'm glad to hear that we are going in the right direction. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd sit for any questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Moline? Questions? Brett, thank you very much. Hang with us in case we do have a question. With that, I'll go to Mr. Reentz. Reentz.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brian Reentz, Director of Sales and Logistics for Navajo Transitional Energy Company. First, let me thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee this morning. I'd also like to address the question asked earlier of the stockpile capacity at the utilities. We believe it to be considerably less than 2 to 3 months. Navajo Transitional Energy Company was formed in 2013 as an autonomous company under Navajo law. We're wholly owned by the Navajo Nation, who is our sole shareholder. They are a federally recognized tribe, which qualifies us as a 100% minority-owned business. We were created for the specific purpose to protect and promote the economic and financial best interests of the Navajo Nation, as well as to improve the economic, financial, and social conditions of the nation. We are the third largest coal producer in the United States and operate 4 separate thermal coal mines. We have 2 mines in Wyoming, our Antelope and Cordero mines, Spring Creek mine located in Montana, and our Navajo mine located in New Mexico. We employ over 1,500 employees. In 2021, NTEC contributed $48 million directly to the nation, which accounted for 30% of their general fund. When combined with the Four Corners Power Plant, which NTEC owns a 7% interest, provides 40% of the general fund. We also contributed an additional $76 million to the economy in the form of wages, vendor support, community contributions, and other investments. NTEC's export business has suffered significantly as a result of rail mismanagement and decisions made from the BNSF headquarters. While the crisis appears nowhere near a conclusion, we have suffered well in excess of $100 million. However, I would like to focus on how the rail mismanagement has impacted our Wyoming mines. We sell over 45 million tons of thermal coal annually to over 32 customers and 46 generating facilities located throughout the U.S. We export 5 million tons of thermal coal into the seaborne market via West Shore Terminal, located outside Vancouver, British Columbia. We have been engaged in the export business since 2008. We are one of 2 thermal coal companies that established the thermal coal export business through West Shore. Over the last 5 years, we averaged 4.2 million tons shipped per year, including during a depressed 2020 COVID year, when we still were able to ship 3.1 million tons through West Shore. We have existing long-term port contracts with West Shore and rail agreements with the BNSF. NTEC added Wyoming-based contractors at the end of 2021 to meet additional demand in 2022 at Antelope and Spring Creek mines. These contractors brought on additional local employees to support these contracts, entered into service agreements with local vendors, and were forced to terminate these agreements, and we would guess have had impacts on their employment of local individuals. This was due to the lack of service and have to terminate them earlier than planned. We also released around 40 employees from Spring Creek mine due to the lack of service, primarily in our export segment, and had a hiring freeze for the last several months. Our headcount is 125 personnel less than where we plan to be at this point in the year. We had to declare force majeure for the first time in the company's existence due to the lack of export service. This has caused a loss of reputation in the global export market. We will have to rebuild relationships that took years to establish. Korean customers have stated they have no other alternative but to turn to Russian coal to meet their supply demands. The lack of rail service has caused the company to incur demurrage in excess of $20 million in our export segment. The anticipated tax impact of rail performance just at the Wyoming mines is estimated to be around $47.6 million. To be clear, we do not believe the cause of our issues with the railroads lies with the people they have brought forth today. There are many excellent rail workers in Wyoming and elsewhere that are doing their best to provide the best service they can every day, and we appreciate them. Our firm belief is that the problems and our economic hardships have been directly caused by decisions being made by management in Fort Worth and perhaps even in Omaha. Again, I'd like to thank you again for the time this morning to speak.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, is that export statistics you're giving us, is that mostly Montana coal?
Mr. Rentz?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. That comes out of our Spring Creek mine located in Montana.
Okay. Other questions? No. So, Mr. Rentz, You've indicated a number of problems. What has NTEC been doing to try to resolve those issues?
Mr. Chairman, we've increased communication with the railroads, tried to increase dialogue. We've let them know, as many times as we can, we have got plenty of coal at our mines and plenty of capacity to be able to ship coal as soon as the trains are delivered. We've talked to customers, let them know the same messages. At this time, communication is our best resource. So that's where we continue to push those messages.
Okay, so Mr. Rentz, I'm right in assuming that the lines of communication are staying open between NTEC and the railroads.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. We've increased communication from where we had previously due to the service issues.
Okay. All right. Okay. Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned some at the tail end of your comments about the decisions being made at high levels, but you didn't elaborate. Can you elaborate on that? Because I am curious to know what the root cause of all this is, and if you can expand on it, I'd appreciate it. If you can, obviously I understand that, but just to help us as a committee understand what these decisions that are being made and how they're affecting you personally and your employees, it's interesting to me. So if you can answer more detailed on that, that would be great.
Mr. Rentz.
Mr. Chairman, sir, the decisions made primarily, I will say, in Fort Worth have to do with our export business. And the decision to provide service for one mine over another mine is where we believe those decisions have impacted our business. In essential, the railroad is deciding who is getting the service and who is not getting the service. They're picking the winners and the losers in this situation.
Senator Beitman.
Yeah, follow up. So do you think the fact that you're shipping coal and coal is falling out of favor with some people, do you think that has an impact? Are they discriminating against you based on what you're shipping, or is it different?
Mr. Rentz.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, it's the same product that both companies are shipping, both mines are shipping. The quality may be a little different, but it essentially is going to the same customers. They are deciding which mine is getting service and which one is not.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? So, Mr. Rentz, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir.
So, Brian, do we have anyone else remotely? Okay, with that then, unless there are no other questions, I don't see any, I will close public testimony. So I think with that concludes this topic. Any other questions? Nope. So Ms. Joyce, Mr. Jones, Mr. Anderson, thank you very much. I think we'd be interested, we have what, 3 months to our next meeting, November? About 3 or 4 months. So maybe just an update, quick update at our November meeting on progress you've made. And that, I think that would be a major help to all of us. And I'm not asking for a 100-page paper. Please don't. Frankly, we don't have time to read them. Right now, I get 150 different reports each year. And I can tell you, I don't read all of them. So 2 pages maximum if you want to do that. But if not, just show up and we'll look for maybe a half hour at the most of just kind of an update, where you stand and how things are going. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we're actually, I think we're ready for lunch. Mr. Co-Chairman, it's 1:45 noon. Next topic is up at 1:30. Brian, do you know, is everyone who wants to speak on the RFID tags going to be available earlier than 1:30? Do you know?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I haven't heard as of yet, but I can reach out over the lunch hour.
Okay, 1:15. Okay, so we will recess for lunch until 1:15. They should be a little early. Okay, and I know Mr. Moline is still probably watching, so I know he wants to speak on that. And then that should also give Mr. Ryman an opportunity to get here. So with that, we are in recess until 1:15.